What's up, swammers? You're listening to the Swimmingly Show. I'm Charlie Halchin.
And I'm Hayes Johnson. We are talking about the sport we love, and we're definitely not afraid to call out what needs fixing and all the great things in our sport.
So we swam at every level: Summer League, NCAA, the Olympics, everything in between. Now we work with thousands of teams across the country, trying to help make swim meets more fun and more simple.
And this show, Charlie, is for swim parents, it's for coaches, and anyone trying to make swimming better. And today's topic is a good one. I have experienced it a lot. I feel it in Summer League coaching. I've felt it in all the coaching that I've done, and it is why you probably shouldn't be watching your kids at practice.
Yeah, all right, let's jump in. So that's a good specific one for this show. Just to start with the question again, should parents be watching their kids practice? Should parents be at swim practice?
Yeah, I'd say short answer, most of the time, no. Not because it's like this secret space, but because it changes literally everything when a parent is watching. Changes the vibe of practice, it changes the athlete, it actually changes the coach, the flow of practice, all shifts.
So the argument against is vibes. Is that right?
All the vibes.
It's vibes. All right. Well, let's build on that argument. Okay. So yes, we've probably all seen it. Kids are looking, it's don't look at me, look at coach. Kids are looking at parents. Who's the authority figure now all of a sudden because the coach is supposed to be, but then you have mom or dad there. That's confusing for a kid. Coaches are also feeling that pressure, especially depending on the tenure or the age of that coach. Some it's not going to be a big deal, but it's irritating. And some they're going to feel a lot of pressure because parents maybe 20 years older than them. And then suddenly we're not focused on development and the coach swimmer relationship here. It's a demonstration. It's a performance for the parents.
Yeah, it's an important thing to talk about. And I don't think this is talked about enough because the parents' role with any swimmer, even the team and the coaches, is pretty critical. So, watching practice might not be helping the way you think it is if you're actually on deck in the bleachers. Like we all see it.
Right.
And you might think it's helping, but I'm going to argue that it's not in multiple ways.
Now, I think we're going to get to the fun part of the conversation in a second, which is, how do you bring the parents and what is the parents' role? How do you demonstrate the value of this sport? Because we're not saying that you shouldn't do that, but we are saying, I think anybody listening probably agrees as well. Practice, as we understand it today, is probably not the time for that 99% of the time. So, Hayes, break it down. What actually happens when parents sit and watch a traditional swim practice? They're on the bleachers, they're 6 feet off the pool deck, they're right there. We're not necessarily talking about they're looking through the glass up top if you have a facility like that and they're separated. We're talking about they're in the space. Break down what happens.
Yeah, I'd say most importantly first, swimmer starts to become hyper aware, maybe a little anxious. And even like the best intentioned kids out there start looking for approval. They'll stop at the wall, they'll look up at mom or dad. Did mom see that start? Did mom see that turn? Did mom see how good my technique was on that 25 or 50? Is dad disappointed I'm not leading the lane? Things like that are the things that the kids start to become super hyper aware of.
Yeah, exactly. The practice is just a continuation of what was going on in the car ride to practice, is going to be a continuation of the car ride home from practice. And so you're not, it's like I said, again, it's a demonstration instead of that area for development.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd say second, coaches often start to coach differently. I'm guilty of this for sure. Not always, but a lot of the time, this is actually what happened because the coaches are there looking at the kids in the lanes and They know right over their right shoulder or their left shoulder, someone might be standing or sitting right in the bleachers. So it's very hard not to acknowledge that, even, in your mind subconsciously. As a coach, you're going to do something differently knowing that the parents are behind you.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm not necessarily against adding pressure to coaches in the right ways.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about the space for the coach and the swimmer to develop, to fail forward, everyone likes to use that phrase, to do focused practice, to grow, to think like that, you have to protect that space for sure.
Yeah,
so,
no doubt.
So diving in, unpack the coach's side a little bit more because you're still on deck every year. Take us through that space and that time between coach and swimmer.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I feel it, but coaches may feel like they're being evaluated. If they're across the pool, if they're in the bleachers right behind them, they're gonna
Mhm.
feel like they're being evaluated. And like the parent is grading every set, every correction, every interaction, that can sometimes lead to coaches giving more attention to that specific kid. And I'm actually guilty of this. And I've caught myself doing it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
Hayes, what are you doing? Do not do that. Just because you have a coach staring at you, staring at the swimmers, you might feel like you need to give that swimmer a little more attention, even when it's not warranted.
And if you're like me, you might even overcompensate in the opposite direction and intentionally not give the focus to that kid because you know that parent is there. So you're trying to make a point to yourself and to them. And then you're like, well, wait a second, that's not fair to the swimmer either. So yeah, totally understood. I mean, it's the shift is from team to, audience to performance.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. So coaches might soften corrections because they don't want to be that coach who's too harsh in front of a parent.
Mhm.
They might talk to them differently if the parent's not there. I know that
Yeah.
happens for sure. Or they overcoach a swimmer just to appease the parent watching it.
Right. Right. And if they're doing that, then it's not really coaching the athlete at that point.
Yeah. Or are we coaching the parent through the swimmer?
Yeah, right. Managing the parent through the swimmer is probably a
That's
better
it.
way to
Yeah.
put it. Yeah. Not manipulating the parent through the swimmer, but managing the parent through the swimmer. And we don't want to do that either,
No.
obviously. So if we give the parent the benefit of the doubt here, most of the time and this is what I feel strongly about this component. They want to understand. And if they're going to understand, they have to be involved somehow. If they're going to be supportive, they have to be involved somehow. So we have this friction point. Let's talk about that friction point a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think all the time, I would say the parents care deeply. No one's
Mhm.
arguing that, but involvement doesn't always equal observation. There are definitely more hardcore parents out there that are analyzing stroke technique and turns and starts while they're at practice, and then really are a lot of parents that are there because they got 5 kids at the pool and they don't want to leave the pool and they just might be there because of a carpool thing, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a difference between being engaged and being present in person every day at practice.
Exactly. Yeah, I think a great swim parent will probably show up, support at the right moments. On the car ride home, obviously, we talked about this in our last conversation, how important that ride home is with the kids after meets at team events, and not necessarily by showing up to every single practice with a Starbucks in hand and notes, frantically writing notes on their technique, on their notepad or something like that.
Yeah, right. Parents, they need to be told what their role is. They're searching for that role. They're trying to understand that role. Some are veterans and they understand it better than others. But it does go back to the leadership of the program or the coach for that particular group that if they don't want them on the pool deck during practice, let's say, and I think by and large that's a healthy thing. That's good. And then they're going weeks where they're just dropping off, picking up, and they don't. It's like a black hole. They don't know what's going on. They trust the coach. It's not a trust issue necessarily, but they have no clue what's happening. Coach's leadership for the team is going to have to step up. It's the communication that goes out via email after practice. You got to prioritize that. You got to make that integral to it. If they're not on the pool deck and they drop off, they pick up, you can only do that so many times. After the 17th time, that you picked your kid up from the pool, you have no idea what's going on, and coach hasn't communicated. That's an issue. Now that becomes a trust issue. And so coaches, so a lot of you guys do this really well, but that cadence of communication has to be a natural rhythm, and it's not necessarily your focus because you want to focus on the kids and the development and the practice, but your customer or the families, they're writing the checks. You have to make sure that there is a demonstration of value to those parents. And it can't be one swim meet every 6 weeks where they get sit in the bleachers at a pool 2 hours away.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you
Yeah, I
think
mean,
about
no, I think that's right, and I think at the end of the day, your summer doesn't really need a second coach in the bleachers. They need that parent to be the parent in the car ride home, supporting them in the right way, like we talked about last time, loving the sport, making sure they still enjoy it and love it. Those are the
that?
important pieces. I mean, Charlie, you've coached at the Y, right?
Yep.
Yoda. So, I mean, was there ever an example where you had to manage a parent that had often lingered on the pool deck where it was like, okay, maybe this needs to change.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's always that one parent. Coaches have all those examples. They want private lessons. One family really wanted private lessons, and the daughter was about 10 years old. She was getting older, but she wasn't in the senior group. She wasn't in the teenage group yet, and their expectations didn't necessarily match her commitment level, or not even commitment level yet. Just she's still discovering the sport. She's doing other activities, and they want her at practice, and now they want her doing private lessons with Coach Charlie. And that, where she was in her development, she wasn't ready for that. She needs to come to me and say that. So how do you manage the expectations of those types of parents? You use your emotional intelligence as best as you can. And I think the biggest thing that I learned in my time doing that was just being really direct and not beating around the bush. I think going back to the parents don't have a lot of FaceTime with you coaches. It's drop off, it's pickup, it's 30 seconds after the swim meet in the parking lot. It's things like that. They don't have a lot of time with you. And if you play the passive aggressive game with the overbearing parent, with the kid that's not committed, for example, just give it to them straight instead. Just pull them aside and say, hey, look, listen, we got to get on the same page about this. Your family's terrific. Your kid, their commitment level just isn't there yet. It's not that they won't be there, but the biggest thing is we gotta get out of their way. We gotta let him or her own their swimming. And I think it goes back to coaches so focused on trying to help the kids develop, and parents have limited time to interact and communicate, that it's easy to fall into that passive aggressive with the parents. And I think they just have to be direct, pull them aside and say, hey, here's the update, and do it in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, that's so important. And being direct in a respectful way, obviously, has got to happen. But letting them know that practice is where mistakes are supposed to happen.
Right.
Stop turning it into a performance. Like, these kids need to learn that they can make mistakes in practice without looking up at mom or dad every single lap, right? I mean, because it becomes performance at the end of the day. They're trying to perform for their parents if they're sitting around, rather than making mistakes over and over again, because that is where you're going to learn in the right way from your coach.
I think that's a critical communication soundbite, or to put in an email. Coaches, if you're not sending out Loom videos, or if it's just still written email, that's good. But attach a video to it too. It's so easy to do now. But I like what Hayes said about, failing is a part of practice. Like that's the space to do that, parents, and reiterating that, the failing forward, if you want to use that term, that's great. This focused practice concept, Daniel Coyle from the Talent Code talks about focused practice, and focused practice involves a lot of bite-sized chunks of getting it wrong and getting it wrong and getting it wrong until you get it right. And you have to have an environment where you're allowed to get it wrong. The coach is facilitating that sort of mindset and attitude to each swimmer. The coach is facilitating that mindset so that swimmer to swimmer, the teammates are encouraging this growth mindset. And it's hard to have a bubble, create a safe space, is a cliche term these days, but this safe space for athletes to fail forward, to use all the cliche terms there in one sentence. So talk about the swimmer, Hayes. What's the swimmer feeling when the parent is there, if they still are on that pool deck during practice? Walk us through that.
Yeah, even on the summer swimming pool deck. I mean, every summer I see this within the first week or two. Obviously, you get a lot of new swimmers at the beginning of each summer, which is amazing. But you also have these parents that aren't aware of what goes on at swim practice. They're not really sure how a swim practice works. So I immediately see a lot of pressure building up, tons of anxiety, sometimes even embarrassment. I mean, these kids will come and they'll swim and they look at mom and dad and they feel like they did something wrong and they're embarrassed. I've had swimmers tell me, my dad watches every practice and critiques my pace times in the car and critiques my starts and my finishes. And that's not motivating, I can assure you. It's sometimes way more stressful than you might think.
So we had a parent in our carpool when I was younger, and he was that parent. He was that parent, and we would carpool together. His boys were the same age as me and my brother, and he knew my splits and my brother's splits as well as he knew his own kids' splits, which you shouldn't know any kid's splits if you're a parent, right? But he knew his own kids' splits. He knew our splits. He could talk about practice and training regime. It was so much, and it burned one of their boys out pretty quickly. The other one kept swimming, but that's it. I mean, everyone has that story of sitting in the back seat and like your dad or the other dad from the other family like, just knows too much about like practice and what's going through your head. You're like, man, he's got the stopwatch and the clipboard walking around at swim meets. Like
100%.
it was a great, great guy and a great family, but you just got to cool it. You just got
Yeah,
to
and
cool it.
that ultimately brings me to this point. Like the swimmers want autonomy. They really do. They
Yeah.
want to learn how to struggle without being rescued or being told what to do by mom or dad. And when a parent is always there, it robs them of that space to grow. Basically, like you were just saying, if you're getting bombarded with that stuff in the car ride home after, of course that's going to burn a kid out.
You're gonna shut them down. They're gonna shut down. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and then you have the type A's that, they're just gonna put their nose to the grindstone and just swim as fast as they can up and down the pool. And that looks good if you're an uninitiated parent, but a lot of the times that's not what you're trying to do in practice. You're trying to do the skill, you're trying to learn the technique or the thing that the coach is trying to instill in you. And it doesn't always necessarily mean just racing up and down the pool as fast as you can, but you're looking, sometimes kids looking for that approval from their parents. They can miss the boat on not the shutdown side of the spectrum, but the I'm just going to swim as hard as I can without thinking side of the spectrum. And that doesn't work either.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, these kids have got to trust their parents, and they've got to know that they're there to support them at the end of the day, regardless of how a practice went.
Yeah. Yeah. If you feel, parents, if they feel a need to watch every single practice, whether they realize they're doing this or not, they're signaling that they don't fully trust the coach. That message is going to be received by the coach eventually, if not very quickly. And that's just going to create you're going to be, that family is going to be sort of mentally targeted by the coach is like, okay, it's one of those families. Like I need to probably subconsciously, they're just going to be trying to stay away from you, frankly. And that's unhealthy.
Yes, and like the trust between the parent and the coaches is absolutely essential. Like they have to have that, or the parent or the coach is going to treat some parents differently,
Right.
not because they really want to. It's just because they have that frustration and they don't feel like the parent is trusting their coaching styles, which has to happen at a team.
That's
Has
right.
to.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing, and I grew up swimming in Raleigh, and most swimming communities are, they can be political, or when swimmers jump ship at one team, and a bunch of other families follow. And all of that stuff is really frustrating. And one of the things that kind of is at the core of that is parents have this weird expectation, or they can, that the coach has to treat all the swimmers and all the families the same. And then it's this, they're going to keep score of, well, did we get treated? Is everyone being treated? Coaches are humans. They're not going to treat everyone the same, coach, swimmer, or parent. And that's a good thing because they're humans and they interact with humans on a relationship basis. And so they're just going to have a different relationship with this family versus this family based on who you are in return and who you are in engaging with them. And so it's a two-way street. Parents need to learn how to treat the coaches in a way that, they want to be treated as well. And if you're overbearing, they're going to keep you at arm's length. Whether they realize it or not, it's just going to happen. If you say things like, Coach, it's great to see you. I really enjoyed watching the kids swim at that meet today. And that's it. And then you just stop talking after that. That stuff goes a long way.
Yeah.
If
I
you
mean,
just
coaching isn't easy. I mean,
right.
it's just not, especially when you're on a larger team and you're trying to micromanage a lot of families and help them understand what you're doing, your coaching philosophy, all of that stuff. So, I mean, coaching is messy, right? I mean, it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And they need to be able to coach and have the space to do that. But I'll be harder on the coaches. You're being harder on the parents, I think, in a way. The coach has got to figure out if we have the channel for communication with the swimmer and the athlete, and most of that is at practice. You've got to figure out the channel for the communication with the parents so that when the swimmer gets home and the car ride is just about life and not related to the practice, the parents being communicated in their channel in the appropriate way from the coach. And so they're not asking the swimmer to regurgitate, well, what happened? What'd you do? What did coach say? Like most of that is overbearing. You can stop at, I'm glad you enjoyed practice today. Or you can stop at, I'm glad I enjoyed watching you swim that race today. And then it's on the coach to figure out the channel for the communication with the parents. You've got the channel for communication with swimmers in practice, but you've got coaches, you've got to have a channel for communication with the parents.
Yeah, that's massive because at the end of the day, parents only see a little sliver of what goes on behind the curtains, right? Like
Hmm.
if a parent does end up showing up at practice and they happen to see one bad day or how a coach interacts a certain way because of this, that, or the other, you might think that that coach is not doing the right thing. But you
Right.
don't see this overarching philosophy, the progress over weeks and months that actually get these swimmers where they need to be, which is so important. Like you,
That's right.
and to your point, the communication between coaches and families, that is going to help solve that.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing in that practice session, if you have eyes on that as a parent and you don't understand, and we don't really believe you should be there in the first place, but if you're there, the coach very likely with a new athlete is spending some number of weeks, maybe months, in figuring out how to adapt to the needs of that swimmer. And so if you could watch a 6 week or 8 week or 12 week cycle and it looks really messy for the swimmer, and it may just be simply because the coach is trying to figure out how to adapt to the swimmer. And so they maybe have a philosophy over here and it's not quite working. You don't abandon that philosophy just because there's this nuance with this athlete, but after 12 weeks you might start adapting and changing something. And the
Totally.
coach has to have that space. And if you're a parent that doesn't, understand that process, you're just sitting there in the middle of what looks like a messy process going, well, this doesn't make sense at all. And that's it's just not your arena to be in. It's not your
Right.
arena to be in
Because,
as a parent.
yeah, because at the end of the day, good and great coaching isn't about this, perfection every single day. You do have these cycles where you try something and you hope that it changes their sprinting or their mid D or their distance swimming, or you're working on a specific thing.
Mhm.
It really is at the end of the day development over time.
Yeah, yeah,
You
it's
know,
interesting.
the parents like really might get focused on a week. They had a bad week, like it's over, I'm doomed. Like, no, give it time, let it breathe, let that cycle really get through to fruition. And oftentimes that's hard to see if you're only watching from the bleachers sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. I would say it like this. I would say practice, and this is why it can be confusing for parents. Practice, growth in practice for a swimmer isn't like a savings account. It's a mutual fund. What do I mean by that? You you hear the cliche 1% better every day, 1% better every day, and that's good for the back of a t-shirt, but it's also total baloney. It's not a savings account, it's a mutual fund. In practice, what I mean by that is you're not going to watch Hayes get 1% better every day in practice. It's not how it works. It's not how it works. That might be the mindset for the athlete. That's not how it works. What it looks like is more like a mutual fund. But man, 6% better that day. That was blew it out of the park. 2% better. That was great. Oh, this day dropped 1%. But you get the idea, like these ebbs and flows is what it takes to figure out how to acquire that skill, to implement it, to link it to the chain of other skills that you've been working on. And you can't do that by just thinking that everything is perfect and then trying to add that 1%. Thinking everything is perfect, that's the fixed mindset. You have to know that that whole chain of events, there's going to be some tweaks here and some tweaks there. And on some days, it's going to look like a 4% backtrack. And then other days when you start putting that chain of events together, that perfect elbow catch or that great start, it's going to look like your mutual fund grew 12% in one day. And so I think that's an important takeaway if you're unfamiliar with the practice process.
Yeah, I actually love that analogy. That's a really good point and a good way
Oh,
to look
thanks,
at
man.
it. When you start to look at how they're growing, oftentimes you might have parents that start comparing that growth against other swimmers. So this comparison culture.
Mhm.
Charlie's doing this so well. Why isn't my kid doing that? Let's dive into the comparison culture a little bit. Give me your thoughts here.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It just turns into stress for the swimmer, the comparison game. I experienced that, observing other swimmers growing up. You see it all the time where even offhanded comments mean a lot to a kid where I say, oh, they must value so and so swimming more than mine. And then they're not just swimming because they enjoy it or they're swimming because they want to discover or to see if it's right for them. They're swimming because there's a expectation that's been created. And if I don't live up to that, then my mom, isn't going to love me. And that sounds extreme, but that's how it works. I mean, that really is how it works. I've watched an untold number of swimmers go through that process with their parents, and usually the parents have no clue that they're doing it. They think they're being supportive, or they think they're teaching a lesson, and they're not, creating a situation where it starts with comparison to another athlete, and then their kid seeks approval by trying to achieve that. And then the goalpost gets moved because they point to a different athlete the next time or whatever. And then the relationship breaks down, and that seeking of approval becomes resentment. And it's just an unhealthy way for the parent to participate in youth sports.
Yeah, and I think for the parents that are at practice, this comparison thing, it can be larger at the time performances and stuff like that. Like, why is Charlie going so much faster than Hayes, right? And there's a ton of reasons why that might be the case.
Sure.
Okay, like they might be 6 foot tall at 10 years old. They might have a little more talent. They might have a little more feel for the water. They might have put in a lot more work, whatever it is, right? But there's even smaller things. If the parents are at practice and they start questioning, well, why is Charlie in this lane? Why isn't he in that lane? Why isn't he over with his friend? Or why isn't he in this other group? Those are the little things that will really get into the coach's head. And you'll be like, okay, this parent needs to step back and relax a little bit. Like, let me do my coaching.
Right.
And obviously, you need a way to communicate with that parent. But those types of comparisons, aside from the big ones, the time and the stuff like that, those little ones are equally as important. You don't necessarily want the parents nitpicking and asking why your kid isn't doing this and that
Yeah.
because some other one is.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we're bashing on the parents, a little bit on the coaches here. We're helping everyone grow. We've learned how to grow as coaches ourselves. What can we do better if we're parents in that ecosystem? Let's say the swimmer is 6 years old, 8 years old, 10, 12, 15. What is that role for the parents? And if the coach hasn't made it clear, maybe the coach is new or isn't as strong in their role, how can we help guide those parents? What is the right role for those parents, Hayes?
Yeah, I mean, especially for the ones that are at practice for any reason, I'd say let the coach coach. Be supportive of the coach. Maybe learn their philosophy. Maybe learn, what they're doing this month or next month or this cycle, like you had mentioned. But at the end of the day, you got to be a cheerleader for your kiddo and your coach. You got to be a support system. And then even volunteer at swim meets. Let the coaches know that you are there to be a volunteer as well. Like you want to be there to help the program, the coach, and the swimmers.
Yeah. What about on meet day?
Man, get there and cheer and support. I mean, hug your kids if they get DQ'd. Hug your kids and support them if they don't go a best time. That's your time to be loud and proud, I'd say, when they work so hard in practice and then they might fail at a swim meet. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just be their cheerleader, be their support system that they know and love so much.
So meets, be the support system, be the cheerleader, practice. If you're there dropping off or picking up, or you have to be there to some degree, hands off, let the coach coach, let the system work. All right. So if you have to stay at practice, what do you do? Like, let's say there's a logistic where they're just in proximity to the practice and they're not choosing to be necessarily, they just out of necessity, they have to be. How do you manage that as the parent?
Yeah, quite simply, I would say stay invisible. Stay as invisible as you possibly can. I do think, especially for young kids, they're going to be looking at you, to you, for that reassurance and that support when they might do something nice or bad in practice. I'd say that's probably the biggest one. That's what I would focus on, especially, if my daughter were in a pool swimming, and I'd step back and just let the coaches do their thing and make sure she's not looking to me for approval.
Yeah, I'd say a way to physically, like if you're on the pool deck, there's just no way around it. Physically positioning, turning away, from the direct line of sight is a good way to handle that. That does not signal to the swimmer that I don't care about what you're doing or I don't care about you. It signals one, to the coach that you're in charge. This is the authority figure. And two, it signals to your kid, this is the authority figure right now. This is why we're here. Listen to coach. And you don't have to say anything to do that, but body language says a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say, the parent test at the end of the day, I would just ask yourself, am I watching practice for them or am I watching practice for me? So
Yeah, say that again. That's good.
yeah, it's a simple parent test. Ask yourself, am I watching practice for them or am I watching practice for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
if
if
they
you're
answer
watching,
me, that's your sign to take a walk or go run an errand or read a book or go do some work or,
that's right.
set up your computer. Your kid will be better for it for sure.
Great time to go work out in the if there's a fitness center at the pool nearby, or just go for a walk outside, right? No excuses. Now you got your workout time, or nap in the car. Maybe you're
Yeah.
a napper. All right. So what's the big takeaway here? Are we is this message today? Is this for the coaches or is this for the parents? Because we've kind of talked about both.
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about both because at the end of the day, I think you nailed it on the head. The communication between coach and parents has got to be there, whether it's emails or group me's or Loom videos. I think that's a killer idea, actually. But trust your coach, give your kid the space they need. They've got to have that autonomy in the pool. Let
Yeah.
practice be messy. Let there be their, peaks and valleys. That's going to happen,
Right.
and show up when it counts at meets, in the
Yeah.
car, at dinner table at home. That's where it counts as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. Youth sports, I mean, it should be about building confident kids who can become healthy, sturdy young adults. This isn't about actors on a stage. This isn't about having a grand performance, at 10 years old to break a state record. It starts with these parents stepping back and stepping back at the right time.
Yeah. I mean, coaches coach, parents parent, swimmers are going to swim. And when those lanes are clear, that's when the kids are going to thrive. Straight up.
All right, cool. If this hits home, forward it to your team's parents, maybe in the group chat, give them something controversial to talk about this week. We were sure to hit on the parents here in this episode, as well as the as well as the coaches, but definitely send it to that one dad who's timing every lap for all the swimmers on their team. We they know who they are. We're talking about them this week.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, a big call to action here. I'm going to go ahead and take Charlie's, and it's start a recap Loom video to your parents. I
Yeah.
mean, coach, it takes 5 to 10 minutes. That would be a killer way to share the week or share the month, whatever it is. Record a quick Loom video and send it out to your parents. It's personal. It's amazing. It's a great touch.
Yeah. Yeah. They want to hear from you. It's a great way. Turn on a camera. You can just talk into the camera for 20 minutes and tell them about practice, go into detail, don't go into detail. Yeah. I love that one. That's
Me
great.
too.
All
Yeah.
right. So
So
tell them
thanks,
about
guys.
next week. What do we got going on next week?
Ooh, I think next week we might join into why participation trophies might actually be good for the sport or may not be.
The participation trophy. All right. Well, until then, have fun, swim fast, keep everything going swimmingly. See you guys.
Yeah.